All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Monday, July 3rd. Fuck it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Cheerio on and Clayton. It is where you are. It is the middle of the night. That is how dedicated we are to doing this show. That you woke up from a sound sleep in the middle of the night to record because I am on assignment in Europe right now.
Yes, you're
And
in. Well, do we want to say where you? We don't want to say where you are because
I already
obviously,
have. I already have. So listen, if you see me on the streets of London, if you're riding one of the double decker red buses and you see not wannabe, you see BO boy Pat walking the streets of London, wave, say cheerio, and then go about your day.
yeah,
Just,
do not stop.
no, I treat our wannabe boys, wannabe girls, wannabe people
People.
like the guards at Buckingham Palace. I'm
Hmm.
not going to snap at you if you take a picture in front of me, if you say hi, but I'm also not going to acknowledge you.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think I think that the guards at Buckingham Palace really have it down as far as how celebrities should act with fans. It's
Hmm.
just don't hit them, don't pull an Alec Baldwin situation where you're slugging them, but also don't acknowledge them. I think that's the way to go. So Clayton, huge box office weekend. It's 4th of July long weekend in the States. I don't acknowledge that because I'm in London.
Yeah.
But Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny finally opened this weekend. I saw it in London, so I'll be able to later on give a boots on the ground from London report on seeing a movie overseas. But yeah, it opened. And Clayton, why don't you give us a middle of the night New York time plow for this box office weekend of Rage 30th?
All right. So number one is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny made $60 million in its first 3-day weekend. Number 2, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse made $11.5 million, down 39%. It lost 380 theaters. It's at $339.8 million in its fifth weekend. Number 3, Elemental made $11.3 million, down 39%. It lost 385 theaters. It's at $88.7 million in its third weekend. Number 4, No Hard Feelings made $7.5 million, down 50%. No theater change. It is at $29.3 million in its second weekend. Number 5, Transformers Rise of the Beasts made $7 million, down 40%. It lost 671 theaters. It's at $136.1 million in its fourth weekend. And I'm going to go 6 here because
Okay.
we had a newbie at 6. Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, made $5.2 million in its first weekend. Pretty much a failure. So that's the top 6.
Yeah, well, I am just going to quote a line from Anthony D is for disastrous D'Alessandro in his Sunday right through about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. There's no question this is a disastrous result for the finale to a historically beloved franchise film. $60 million, Clayton. And again, we're going with the late Sunday night, reports. I, I could see when the finals come in on Monday, I could very well see Indiana Jones at Dial of Destiny ending up 58 or 59. But this $60 million is a disaster. But here's the thing, it's a disaster based on them spending $300 million to make this movie.
Mhm.
And the problem here to me is that if you're going to greenlight an Indiana Jones sequel in 2023, you need to figure out a way in which you're making that movie and maybe not 60. That's definitely lower than they hoped. But what did they think this movie in 2023 was going to open to where 300 million was going to have been justified? You're looking at a movie that needed to worldwide make at least 600-700 million just to break even. And how could they have expected that out of the fifth Indiana Jones movie? He's 80 years old, Clayton. What were they
Yeah.
expecting?
Well, they just expect that these aging fanboys will buy any slop that they put out. I mean, and listen,
And I think
this
they
is
did. I think the aging fanboys bought the slop. I mean, I know I
yeah,
did.
but these IPs feel to them like slam doinks,
Right.
and we're seeing that they're not. Listen, if you would have told me there was a Star Wars movie that was going to bomb like Solo, I
Right.
mean, that's crazy, but it's like that's what happens is that they think that they can stretch these IPs as far as they can go, and at some point they're gonna snap and be useless, and that's what happened with Indiana Jones. They waited too long. The last one everybody hated,
Right.
right? I mean, the reason they thought that this thing could open big is because the last one opened big, even though it
Right.
was much maligned.
Right.
And so I think that's the thing is that this is what they have to learn is that just because you can doesn't mean you should. Because,
Right.
this is Indiana Jones, which is, it's a long-standing franchise, but it opened lower than a Transformers movie that is a franchise on the wane, right?
Mhm.
Transformers opened bigger than Flash and this. If you would have told me that at the beginning of this summer, I would have called you a name I can't say on mic.
Right, right. Because in that situation, then you're predicting that, wow, I guess Transformers way overperformed, which isn't what happened. Transformers also didn't open that high. It's just the
Mhm,
Flash and Indiana Jones opened so incredibly low. Indiana Jones barely beat the Flash. It
mhm.
barely beat the Flash.
And at the end of they're gonna try to pad the stats here because you're gonna get this July 4th total that's gonna be, what, in the 80s or something. Even that's gonna be pathetic.
Oh, pathetic.
So,
It's gonna be
yeah.
pathetic.
Because if this
Yeah,
thing would have opened at 80 or 85 in its 3-day, that's a disappointment for a movie that cost this much.
right, right. It's you compare it to movies that we've considered bombs for 4th of July openings. I mean, I'm gonna go back here to um wow, much lower than I expected. I thought Wild Wild West did better than it did. Wild Wild West in July of 1999 opened to $27 million. Okay, that's
Yeah,
a
no.
that's a gigantic bomb. I was
Yeah.
I think I might be thinking Lone Ranger. I feel like Lone Ranger is one of those movies that opened 90 or 100 million and was considered a disaster around the same weekend. But yet this Indiana Jones movie, it opened to about 60% of what the fourth movie opened to in 2008. And
Mhm.
again, what I say is how what else did they expect for a fifth movie in the franchise? Opening to 60% of the previous one obviously is bad. It shows a decline in interest, but it also is about what you should expect at this point. I mean, my thing is this movie is about time travel.
Mhm.
And I think that the clear answer here is if you went back in time, there was never a reason to have made this movie because there was no circumstance in which an Indiana Jones 5 in 2023 could have been successful because it had to be budgeted for a lot because you're paying Spielberg and George Lucas just to sit on the couch.
That's the
100
thing.
million of this goes to Spielberg and Lucas to do nothing, to maybe send an email. Maybe they may have sent one email that they said his hat's crooked. You should think about making his hat not crooked in that
Well,
shot.
they
And that's
certainly
it.
didn't
And
say
that's
anything
100
about his
million.
pants. They didn't say anything
Right.
about his pants, so they weren't paying
The
that much attention. Although they probably all wear pants that loose because 'cause they're old men now. But, just something real quick, The Lone Ranger opened at 29.2, and that was a July 2nd opening, so that also was
wow.
not a big opening.
Yeah, yeah. So those movies were even bigger bombs than I remember in my head.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
I I'm in I'm I My memory is putting some inflation on those July 4th openers. So yeah, it's a low number. I think what happened with this movie is I do think that the oldsters ate the slop. I mean, I ate the slop. I
Mhm.
was out there opening weekend. I ate the slop, and I think the oldsters went out. I think that young people did not care about this movie in any way. I think
Mhm.
Indiana Jones is not a character that carried on through the decades. You know, it's more akin to a John Wayne character than it is to even something like James Bond that,
Mhm.
does as much as we call it our dad's movies, James Bond. James Bond does reboot himself, and younger people find a way to care about that. They do not care about Indiana Jones.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that have they already picked a new Bond? They probably have. It's probably another English dude. It's gotta
Probably,
be.
I mean, the way Hollywood relies on these older stars, I wouldn't be surprised if they considered Harrison Ford until this movie opened. You know,
Yeah.
these studios are just this was the summer. This is the summer of the old IP totally flatlining, and these Hollywood studios, they've been using these old IP as their binkies, as their blankies. When things are going tough, they hug Indiana Jones, they hug Transformers, they hug Batman 89, and their binkies disintegrated. You know,
Mhm.
you get old enough, and that blankie that you have to go to bed with every night, eventually it just tears, and you're just going to bed holding a little string. And I think that is what Indiana Jones is right now. It is a blankie that they finally hugged to death.
Now, you saw this film,
I saw this
okay?
film.
And I was going to try and see this film, but then I
Hmm.
couldn't do it to myself. 'Cause it's very
Okay.
hard to go see a bomb while it's happening.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's so
Hmm.
hard to stomach a movie that's not only going to do bad financially, but also from the reviews feels like a slog to sit through,
Okay.
and starts with our hero, and I'm not even an Indiana Jones fan, to be honest with you, but
Wow.
at their lowest, which I understand sometimes you wanna start movies with people at low, at the low end of their life, but this is a summer blockbuster, okay?
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that is the thing that's bumping me here, and I said in the last episode, maybe 60-year-old, 60-plus-year-olds would wanna go see this movie because their twilight is coming, and they wanna see how their hero, Indiana Jones, is dealing with it. And from what I've heard, I don't know, you can tell me, he ain't dealing with it too well.
Here's the thing. I get starting your hero at a problem point, maybe
Mhm.
even a lower, obviously a lower than average point.
Well, look
But
at
they are starting
Ghostbusters
him.
2.
They're starting him at their
Ghostbusters
lowest. They're starting
Ghostbus
him at their lowest.
Ghostbusters 2, they hadn't been ghostbusting for a while, right?
Right.
And then they went back to ghostbusting. So that was like a low point, but it wasn't like, you know, Vecman's son had died.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. The Indiana starts too low in this movie,
Yeah.
and I do think that. And again, he is 80 years old.
Mhm.
And there is just a problem of this is a summer movie that is too depressing. And these Indiana Jones movies started as a version of, 40s serial shorts that George Lucas and Spielberg liked as kids. And those I don't think those shorts ever got to seeing the hero be an old man dealing with divorce and having like a row of pills that are labeled by day. Like I don't
Mhm.
think those shorts ever get to that point because they just stopped making them. And that is the problem with this movie and trying to market this movie is you're marketing, hey, the guy who used to be an invincible, fun adventurer, now you get to see him with his day labeled row of pills. Fourth
Yeah,
of July weekend.
I think
I
and
don't think that
listen,
appeals to anyone. I don't think that appeals to the oldsters who are near death, and it definitely doesn't appeal to, the Gentle Minions crew. That's not going to get the Gentle Minions crew out to the theater.
James Mangold is a director that I like, who's done some
Hmm.
work that I like. But the problem here is that he said, I don't want to do this unless I can make it my way. And when it comes to an IP like this, it's like you have to play with what the essence of the character is and what the stories are in order
Right.
for the actual fans to go. It's like if you had somebody direct a GI Joe movie and you're like, I'm not going to direct this movie unless they can all have PTSD.
Right. Right.
And it's a GI Joe movie. It's about plastic action figures, all right?
Right.
That's Indiana Jones is about a swashbuckling hero, and it doesn't matter if he's 80, he should still be enjoying his life. He should still have, issues and things, but where's that impishness that he used to have? Where's that crooked smile? That's the thing that I think was missing in this movie.
Right.
And that's why it's not interesting to a general audience, but also, like you said, I don't think an 18-year-old wants to see a 80-year-old man headline their movie.
Yeah, and especially an 80-year-old man who's in a really bad way. And
Mhm.
that is how this movie starts, but it also comes through in the marketing.
Yeah.
Like you could have made and then marketed a movie where the problem was, man, Indiana Jones is old and he's having too much fun.
Mhm.
He's just, where a grandchild is saying, "Grandpa, you can't go adventuring every weekend." And
Yeah.
that but there's none of that. This is a movie that Indiana Jones ain't smiling. He's taking his false teeth out. And that is not what
Mm.
people want to see. That is not
Yeah.
what and there was just not a version of Indiana Jones that they made in this movie that could have been marketed that well. They just
Yeah.
had nothing to work with. Y-
Indiana Jones and the bottle of denture cream.
Yeah. 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 And he's having trouble finding the next movie does feel like instead of him going through a cave looking for the Ark of the Covenant, it's him stumbling in the hallway looking for the toilet.
Mhm. How
You
far
know?
is Indiana Jones from the end of The Irishman, where
Oh, we're
he's at the old
mhm.
folks' home and he's
Yeah,
like, "Keep the door open. Could you keep the door open?"
right.
Is
I
that
get
Indiana
scared.
J d oh, this is I'm scared. Does this movie end like that? Because it possibly could.
I think if this movie had gone on 10 minutes longer, that you could have got that shot. It was making a
Okay.
very logical, journey towards him being sitting in a chair by himself, asking, an attendant to keep the door open because he gets scared.
Mhm.
And I just don't I think it's an Indiana Jones that could play at the Angelica, it could play at the local art house, but it's not the Indiana Jones that could have opened to $100 million. I think another problem with this series is what the great Scott Mendelson calls the Tomb Raider trap,
Mhm.
which is it's a sequel to a giant hit movie that people didn't like. And you touched on it that Indiana Jones 4, um, which was what was that one called again? The
Crystal Skull?
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a giant hit, but people didn't like it. And Anthony D. D'Alessandro touches on this in his article that movie benefited from being the sequel to '89's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is beloved. Some
Mhm.
will argue the best movie in the series.
Yeah.
And so Crystal Skull got to be the sequel to that movie, whereas Dial of Destiny is the sequel to Crystal Skull. And even though it's 15 years later, people just had a bad taste in their mouth from that.
Yeah.
They felt like they were done with Indiana Jones.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is coming way too late,
Way
and
too late. He's too old. If we haven't mentioned already, Indiana Jones is 80 years old. That's too old.
And I mean, just to give people perspective, when the last one came out, he was 66 years old.
Mhm.
So that is even a little bit too old. I guess other than if you're Tom Cruise, but Harrison Ford has always seemed curmudgeonly and old. At least
Right.
in our lifetime, he's always
Yeah,
seemed
yeah.
like a real pill.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
surliest pot smoker there's ever been. Usually, people who smoke pot are in a better mood. It seems like it
Right.
only makes him worse and worse. So the thing too is here we got to keep in mind. We mentioned Transformers: Rise of the Beast opening higher than at 61, higher than any of these other movies. Again, this is the same argument that I've made before. The failure of other movies doesn't make a movie a success. So we don't want to
Right.
act like Transformers Rise of the Beast is in any way a success. It's only at 136 domestic and it's dropping. It's dropping theaters. It's not going to make a ton of money, but it's going to outgrow some of these bigger
It's gonna
tentpole
out
movies.
it's gonna outgross Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I mean, Indiana Jones will not get to $130 million domestic.
Mhm.
I do not think this movie is gonna have more than a 2 times multiplier. I mean, we'll
Oh,
see. Obviously, a movie like this that appeals to an older audience will, in theory, not open as big, but possibly have bigger legs. But I do not think the word of mouth, having seen this movie, is going to give this particularly good legs. And I think in 2 weeks, Indy runs into the buzzsaw that is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One, and then it's game over. That
yeah.
that is the end of the Indiana Jones run. Is on July 14th. Tom
Yeah.
Cruise just rides a motorcycle straight over Indy's face, and that's the end of it.
Well, because you're gonna have and I still don't believe that all the Maverick watchers, all the Maverick audience are going to port over to Mission Impossible,
No, no.
but you are gonna get a good number of the older audience who had seen that film and liked it to go see a Mission Impossible movie that they may have not seen one since the first, or they jumped
Mhm.
off on the second one. So you are going to see this sort of audience, go to a Mission Impossible movie and they're going to leave Indiana Jones in the dust where he
Yes,
belongs. I mean,
yes.
I
He is
think,
dust. He is dust at this point.
if you're talking about actual where the character would be now
Mhm.
in 2023, dust on dust. I mean, it's like there's
Yeah,
nothing left of
yeah.
Indiana Jones. So I do think that this is an IP that we can bury.
Yes,
This is a dead
100%.
IP, and now they're gonna try and do young Indiana Jones on a streamer. We know this. We know Disney Plus. There's nothing too low for them to go here.
Well,
But Harrison Ford as this character is done.
here's my I saw this film last night with a friend, with a local who lives in London,
Okay.
and coming out of it, we were talking about where does the franchise go from here, and here's my prediction. My prediction on what they wanted to do is they wanted to do a Phoebe Waller-Bridge spin-off TV show on Disney Plus. That is my prediction, having seen the film, of what their plans were. I think coming out of the disaster of this opening weekend, I think all those plans are up in the air. But to me, that was the clear plan, was to take her Helena Shaw character, spin her off, have Indiana Jones. This is how I think they would have done it, had Indiana Jones then be because Harrison Ford is full in on just being a streaming actor at this point. He's
Mhm.
got 3 different streaming shows. So he's coming in being a cameo on the phone saying, "Oh, when a boulder's coming at you, you should duck to the right, not to the left. All right, bye. Have a good adventure." Like, to me, that was the plan, was that you'd have the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character 10-episode Disney Plus streamo show. But again, I don't think that's on the table now with this movie opening at $60 million.
It can't be. There's no interest. I mean, there was no interest for a Shia LaBeouf spinoff when he debuted in Crystal Skull. Like I think people don't understand that nobody wants Indiana Jones anymore, number 1,
It's too
but they
old. He's
cer
80 years
but
old.
but they certainly don't want a spinoff of Indiana Jones that doesn't have Indiana Jones in the center. So it's
Right.
That's the thing. It's the same thing that we talk about all the time, is that they can't let go of these IPs. Like, we will see another Lone Ranger movie in our lifetime, and that is
Yes.
sick. We will see
Yes.
another
Yes.
Tarzan movie in our lifetime, and
Yes.
that
We'll
is
see another Robin
sick.
Hood. We'll see another Robin Hood.
We will see multiple Robin Hoods. We will see
Yeah.
multiple Robin Hoods. That is a sickness. That is
Yeah.
a not being able to bury the past,
Yeah.
right? And Indiana Jones is a newer character than all of those, but he's
Right.
based on those sort of serialized characters, like you said previously. But that's the thing. If they're not letting Tarzan die, if they're not letting Robin Hood die, then Indy will not die, but it needs to. And Indy is Harrison Ford. And when he dies, it's got to end.
So there is a long sequence in this film that is de-aged. It's the cold open. It starts the movie, a
Hmm.
20-minute sequence that is young Indiana Jones, but not young Indiana Jones is played by, a young actor. Harrison
Hmm.
Ford de-aged. And I had two thoughts during this. One, maybe they should have just done the whole movie this way,
Hmm.
because they were able to get away with it for 20 minutes. So at that point, do it for another hour and 10 minutes and have a 90-minute movie with a DH Harrison Ford. And we
Hmm.
don't have to have the depressing sight of Indy stumbling to find the toilet in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
You don't have to have that. But then my other thought was, will they try again? And try again with the DH Indiana Jones? Do they think that the only problem was that Harrison Ford is old and not just that people don't care about this IP?
Who knows? I mean, the brain trust, and I say that, I mean, that's just the word I'm going to use. I'm not going to say there's actual brains involved over at Disney.
Mhm.
They just don't know what they're doing right now. They
Yeah.
just have no clue what's going
They're
on.
they're flailing.
They're flailing. I
Yeah.
mean, their animation is failing, Pixar is failing, their big IPs are failing. Star Wars can't make its way back to theaters. I mean, Star Wars
Mhm.
is not a theatrical property anymore. That is insane. The more you think about it, it's one of those things that I will just wake up in the middle of the night and think about, and I'm flummoxed by.
Right.
That you have somebody in charge over there who cannot mount a successful film that has to do with Star Wars.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, we don't get into, obviously we talk about David Zaslav and we've talked
Mhm.
about executives, but we haven't talked about Kathleen Kennedy much on the show, but she is the head of Lucasfilms within Disney.
Yeah.
So she's the person who steered the Star Wars sequels, including Solo, all the Star Wars TV shows, and
Mhm.
now this Indiana Jones movie.
Yep.
And
Right into the dirt.
I think, and obviously she'd been a producing partner with George Lucas. She'd been sort of handpicked as the one to steer all this IP, but at some point the axe has got to swing. And this is a movie, Indiana Jones, that's going to lose probably upwards of several $100 million when
Mhm.
all's said and done. And is that enough for Disney to say this person should not be running Star Wars and running Indiana Jones? I mean, Indiana Jones is, like you said, effectively dead.
Yeah.
I don't know what you could do with that. If anything, it's a streamo show, Young Indiana Jones, but they've basically reduced it to its Willow.
Yes.
It's you can
Yes.
make a streaming show that no one watches and that you purge from the service 2 months
Yeah,
later.
it'll be a tax write-down at this point, is the best
Yeah.
case scenario for any further Indiana Jones properties.
Yeah. So at what point, because Star Wars is possibly salvageable. Indiana Jones is done,
Yeah.
but you can't salvage it with having the same person making these decisions anymore.
No, and Kathleen Kennedy has always gotten a lot of hate online, and we are not
No,
diving
no.
into that sort of cesspool, but the buzz coming out of this is that even internally now, they're saying, "We just gotta do something here," because it just looks bad to have somebody in charge who's mishandling things this poorly, even if it's not all them.
No,
It's
no.
their name is on it, right? At some point, their name is on it, and you have to take that golden parachute. Listen, I mean, if Kathleen Kennedy gets let go by Disney, she'll never have to work again. She will, but she'll never have to,
Right,
right?
right.
So it's
No,
not like we're taking food out of her mouth, all
no,
right?
she could eat as much as she wants. Gobble,
Forever.
gobble,
Yeah.
forever.
Mhm.
Yeah, at some point, you just have to start paying someone to sit on a couch, and that's what
Mhm.
Disney did with George Lucas. They're paying him to sit on a couch. And I think at some point, you're paying Kathleen Kennedy to just sit on a couch and not have anything to do with these Lucasfilms properties.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, Indiana Jones, I do think the legs on this are not going to be anything special because I don't think there's anything coming out of this movie that is all that buzzworthy. Obviously had Baby of the Week, Phoebe Waller-Bridge in there, and I thought she was fantastic, and I would love to see her have a spinoff, but I don't think the box office, unfortunately, is going to justify a
Oh,
spinoff movie
and
with
now
her character.
now your view is askew, and we've established
Do
that.
not Kevin Smith me.
And you're even more askew because you saw this movie in jolly old England where she has a fan base?
Yeah, I mean, she walks the streets here. I mean, she's
Okay.
not walking around. She's being, chauffeured around in a limo, I assume, which is how it should be. But she does
Well, she
live
comes from a rich
here,
family, but so
which is great. Yeah.
do you think that well, how did the audience react to her at your theater? Which I think is skewed. Your view is askew, so we cannot really take it, but, like, it's a hometown crowd. How
Yes.
was their reaction to that character?
There was some hooting and hollering,
Okay.
which I listen,
Of the frat boy persuasion?
of English frat boys. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they were throwing their chips around, which I think is a sign of I don't know if it's arousal or just acknowledgement, but that I think that's a local thing as they were throwing their chips.
Okay.
And no,
And those are fries. That's what Americans would know those as fries.
yes, that's what you would call
Okay.
them for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So the crowd was into her. I think that the slurping of the tea was especially rowdy when she would first appear on screen. So the local crowd was happy to see her. And again, I saw her in IMAX, so she was 80 feet tall, whatever their
You're so
IMAX screen
skewed.
is.
I don't even know why I'm asking you these questions because they're giving no information. I might have to actually sit through this thing with a red-blooded American crowd and see what their
Okay.
reaction to all this was and their reaction to her because she's I mean, we are of the mind that the detraction that she would have on this box office is made up. It's an internet phenomenon. I don't think she's well known enough for people to reject this movie because of her. That's a
Yes.
segment of the internet that's not gonna see this movie anyway,
Right.
or they're gonna torrent it when it comes out,
Right.
right, on all the torrent sites. So, but I don't she's not a value add in any shape or form. I don't think one person other than you went to see this movie because of her.
I mean, I
So
was in a full screening in London IMAX, and I would assume that is mostly her at the
but
screening I was
also,
at.
your money doesn't count towards this 60 because this
That's
isn't
true.
right, your money doesn't matter,
My money
Pat.
didn't matter this
Their
weekend
money
towards the
doesn't
six. Yeah.
matter. Their shillings or whatever, their pennies don't matter when it comes
Right.
to true box office because, a big hit over in England makes what, like 30 quid? I don't know.
Right. Right. Right.
Here, when Americans who go and they work for a living and they, bring their lunch pails to work, the Joe lunch pails,
Mm-hmm.
the Jody lunch pails, their money matters. So I want
Mm-hmm.
to sit amongst them and not
Will you
sit
do it?
me. I think I have to because you're giving too much of a skewed view. Your view is askew. So we
Yeah.
can't have that be the last word of how Phoebe Waller-Bridge is being greeted in this film and how an 80-year-old Indiana Jones is being greeted.
Mhm.
Now
Mhm.
here's a question. If Spielberg would have directed this film, I feel like this film would have done better. Do you agree?
I do think so. I think they underestimated how big or how tied in even for the fans Spielberg is to this franchise. It's
Mhm.
not just Harrison Ford. It's and also I think we as just a people have been hard on George Lucas,
No, don't
and that
stick up
sort of
for
term.
George Lucas. He's not
I,
no.
but in terms
It's
of this
Spielberg's the
IP,
one here.
no,
Spielberg's the one here that needs to be behind the lens.
but I think even just in terms of perception, we've underestimated how much people look at this as a Spielberg, Lucas, Harrison Ford collaboration. And
The
even
true
again,
fans, yeah.
if Lucas is because he was always minimally involved in these, or he was
Mhm.
always a guy who seemed to be just like given his rants on the set, and they would either take or leave what he's saying.
Yeah.
But just the marketing being able to show them on that set laughing behind the camera together, Spielberg showing, "Hey, George, look through the lens, look at what he's doing." And then Harrison Ford comes over and slaps him on the back. And just having that image in the marketing materials, I think was more important for the fan base than Disney thought. They wanted to see Spielberg, Lucas, and Ford on set together. And seeing, James Mangold just sit in a chair and him and Harrison
Gl
Ford not even acknowledge each other. I don't think that gets
glowering.
anyone to.
Ugh,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
glowering and thinking about mortality. The thing with Spielberg is that he still
He did
got
it
it.
his way. Mangold did it his way. He got to do Indiana Jones as a doddering, dying old man. So he got to do that.
And that's the thing is, like, you gotta if your director is like, that tentpole summer movie, I wanna make it incredibly sad. You can't let them. That's the thing with Maverick. Maverick is not sad. Maverick has
Mhm.
moments of poignancy. Maverick has moments of remembering youth fondly, but it by
Mhm.
no means depresses you.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
that's a lesson to be learned from Maverick. Everybody, we're gonna see Maverick is one of those high water marks for resuscitating an IP that is gonna be attempted to be duplicated, but may never be duplicated
Mhm.
because it was done so expertly. And obviously, it didn't have as much competition last year when it came to how many, uh, you know, weeks it could have the PLFs. I don't think that's a case here that matters. It's not like Indiana Jones is gonna lose out on business because it doesn't have PLFs going forward. People just don't wanna
Mhm.
see this film. But I
Mhm.
do think that whoever's gonna try and do these sort of, uh, requels, whatever you wanna call them, these, what do they call them? Legacy sequels, they have to dissect this movie,
Mhm.
Maverick, and really
Mhm.
see what it did well and see what it avoided, and they
Mhm.
didn't do that with this film. They didn't look to it and say, "Oh, well, how can we make this fun?" It was
Right.
all about what James Mangold wanted. He wanted to play in this sandbox, and he pissed in the sandbox, and you
Right.
can't allow these no-name directors like, he is not a no-name, that was rude. He
No, of
has a
course
name,
not.
but general audiences don't know him. I think if you said, "Who's James Mangold?" To my mom, she'd be like, "I don't know," and I'd be like, Ford v Ferrari?" She'd like, "Oh, yeah, my husband liked that movie. Your father liked that movie."
Right, right. He
And I could
sounds
say
like he
Logan.
sounds like he owns a casino.
Yes, yes. Have you
He
been to
sounds
yeah,
like
have you been
who's James
yeah,
Mangold? Oh, I stayed at Mangold in Vegas
yeah.
10 years ago.
And that's the thing is, like, unless it's Tarantino, unless it's Scorsese, unless it's Spielberg, unless it's a name that wants to put their stamp on something, like a Tarantino Star Trek movie, I don't think it would have worked, but if that would have come out, there's interest in that person's take on this. I don't
Mhm.
know if there's that much interest in a James Mangold take on something
Right, right,
because
right,
she's just not a marquee director, and not many people are. That's not disrespecting him. Not many people are.
right, right. Well, I think what happened here is he had the, uh, evidence of, "Hey, I did sad, broken down Wolverine in
Logan,
Logan,
yep.
and that worked, and everyone loved it, and I think it got a screenplay nomination and all that." But it doesn't work with Indiana Jones. He basically tried to replicate that with Indiana Jones and say, "Oh, we'll just Logan him. He'll just be sad and old and broken down." But that is a misreading of what people wanted out of this IP. Wolverine always had the anger and the sadness and all that mixed in with him. And it was also at the time when everything superhero was just people were going to see it because it was a superhero movie. And they made that mistake of trying to Logan Indiana Jones, and it just made people upset. I just want to throw this out there to get back on the Phoebe Waller-Bridge
I don't think
factor.
we need to get
This
onto that
the
again.
no, the top foreign market for this movie was the UK, $8.9 million. I think she gets most of the credit for that. It over-indexed in the UK, in her hometown, in London. So, you know, maybe you make a low budget, Mr. Bean type spinoff. Not the same tone, but you're making a Indiana Jones spinoff starring her where you budget it so it could be a blockbuster in the UK and it'll be profitable. That
Or
might
why
be the
doesn't
way
she
to
just
go.
do a one-woman show where she talks about filming it? That's the play.
I mean, I'd fly back here for that. I would
Now,
love to see the one woman show about how she played Helena Shaw.
before we move off of this, the reason why Logan, I think, had success, other than the reasons you said, is that Old Man Logan also was already a character that had
Mm,
had a comic book. So, known quantity to the fanboys. So that
right,
also was something that was helpful.
right. It is something when you look back because they did it a Young Indiana Jones TV series,
Oh, yeah, it
30
was
plus years
crafty.
ago. But they didn't ever consider back then, instead of young Indiana Jones, what if we cast Ed Asner in 1990 as
Mhm,
old Indiana Jones? They knew better then. They knew if we're going to do a, another version of Indiana Jones, you go younger. You don't go older,
mhm.
and it's deep down they knew that old Indiana Jones was always going to be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they knew this thing was I mean, again, here's the other thing we gotta talk about. Another stinker that has gotten the Tom Cruise thumbs up. Tom Cruise, the worst movie critic in America,
Mm.
giving this a thumbs up, man. This does not bode well for his film, because I don't trust his opinion on his own film now.
But again, he's being bribed. We talked about this. He's being bribed with PLFs. Tom Cruise is being bribed with big screens to give these endorsements. That has to be the case. That
Now
Disney promised him will release a certain number of indie screens. I mean, obviously, Dead Reckoning is going to get everything on July 14th, but I think this had to be bribery by screen, and he honestly at this point the studio should let him admit it
mhm.
because you don't want Tom Cruise's credibility to be shot. So admit that he got paid off with screens, and we'll all just acknowledge that and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, that I mean, that's when we write the book on the history of BO, COVID
Hmm.
and post-COVID, that will be definitely touched upon. Now, let's quickly talk about the other newbie, Ruby Gilman, Teenage
Hmm.
Kraken. This movie tanked, opened lower than Paws of Fury opened last summer.
Wow.
And just to remind people, Paws of Fury was a movie that I think was completed in 2014 or something crazy. Maybe not
Mm,
that long ago, but it definitely was sitting on a shelf. The thing with this movie is it was hastily thrown onto the schedule,
yep.
minimal promotion. I mean, like I said, I saw one poster at a bus stop that most people shouldn't stop at. And, you know, this thing cost $70 million, so it's not like it was a cheapie.
Mhm.
This is the kind of thing, and listen, movies should play in theaters. This thing is gonna do well on streaming probably because it was on a theater marquee, so that's good. But 5.3 million for a $70 million budgeted film,
Mhm.
that's very, very bad.
Yes, yes, and I did predict it would go almost I mean, I predicted probably, what, 4,000,000 or so, but this was a movie that even after, everyone knowing it was gonna bomb, the projections were still, it'll do 9 to 12,000,000. It's an animated big screen movie getting
Oh,
a
no, I think this was 7 I think the wasn't the they were saying it was gonna
no, there
do
was
s
tracking around 9,000,000. Listen, it opened in 3,400 theaters, and it's an
Mhm,
animated film from Universal. Even the low expectations for this were higher than what this came in at. This is a
mhm.
full on nobody wanted this. I mean, I think, just on a superficial level, the first problem is the title is a very Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. So you're starting with Ruby Gillman. That your title is the name of a character that no one's ever heard.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
terrible. And why
even
why
the first Indiana Jones movie it's been retitled since as Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But the first Indiana Jones movie was just called Raiders of the Lost Ark because at that
Yes,
point
yes.
Indiana Jones was not a character. So,
Yeah.
wait until Ruby Gillman has a hit before you put her
Yes.
name in the title. Call this I mean, a Teenage Kraken on its own isn't that much more appealing because I don't think there's high awareness of Krakens.
Mhm.
Um, but I think even just Teenage Kraken is a better title than Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken.
I
Because
mean, you famously didn't know if a Kraken was real or not real.
yes, I still am not completely sold that it's real. You say it is,
No, I
but
said it's not real.
you said it's not. Okay.
Krakens are not real.
Okay, well, now I'm not sold that it's not real. Now I could be swayed that it's real.
So you don't trust me is really the issue here.
And not as an underwater expert. No, I don't.
Alright. Well, I know what's
Um,
real and fake. Are
but I
unicorns real,
don't
Pat?
what do you say?
They're not real.
Okay, well, I have to look into it. I have to ask a
Alright.
zoologist then.
Yeah.
Um, I think that it's a bad title because it's the name of a character that people know they don't know.
Mhm.
They don't know who Ruby Gillman is, but they know they don't know who Ruby Gillman is. And I think that's almost like a dare to
Yeah.
go see, you know, listen, famously, what is the original title of the Bradley Cooper movie Burnt?
Adam Jones.
Adam Jones. And they knew because there's posters out there. You could Google it. There's posters for Burnt under the original title, Adam Jones.
Yep.
But they realized, you know what? Adam Jones is not IP. Let's change it to Burnt. Now, obviously, that didn't quite save the box office of that film, but I do think it probably helped. I think Adam Jones would have done even worse if it was titled that than Burnt did.
Well, the problem too was the poster said Bradley Cooper is Adam Jones. You can't have the actor's name be more interesting than the name of the
Yeah.
character.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
We've always said
he
that with that movie that wasn't ever titled that. Yeah.
here's a series that ended up being 2 films and maybe 3 films in the future, who knows, that did this correctly, is The Boy. Remember The Boy, which was a horror
Mm,
movie about a doll? And then the sequel was called Brahms, The Boy 2.
yes.
They used the name in the second one
And the
because
second
you
one.
already
Yep.
knew who Brahms was.
Yes. 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 Listen, the first Rambo movie was not called Rambo. It was called First Blood. And then the
Mhm.
sequel was Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Part 2.
And
Yeah.
then after that, it was just Rambo 3, even though there was never a Rambo 1. But which is to say, if you don't have an IP character name, maybe don't have the name of the first movie in your hopeful series be the name of the character that no one's ever heard of before. Does
Yeah,
the failure of this Teenage Kraken movie, do you think it does anything to harm the momentum for a movie that I'm still high on in August, which is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem? Do you think Teenage Kraken bombing harms the teenage IP at all?
no. I mean, just because, I mean, I would say if you were going to open up another teenage sort of that wasn't an already known IP like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think we would have an issue there. If they were gonna, like I said, a unicorn, if it was gonna be Teenage Unicorn was opening up, then I'd
Mm,
be worried for Teenage Unicorn. But Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at this point, they really are focusing, I guess, in that movie on them being teenagers, which is interesting because they rarely actually do that.
mhm. I'm high on it.
But I do think that I don't even think when I say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles anymore of the words I'm saying. I
Mm,
just say it because it's just a
right.
known quantity to me at this point.
Right, 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 right. Okay. I mean, I think then Seth Rogen, who's producing that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem film, could breathe a little sigh of relief because he probably saw Teenage Kraken bombing and thought, he turns to his producing partners, does this screw us? Guys, does this screw us? Takes a big puff. Tell me the truth. Does this screw us? But the BO boys are saying that Teenage Kraken's opening weekend does not screw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
Yeah. Now, you wanted to talk about a future movie
Well,
here.
I do think one thing we need to I think the only other movie we need to touch on from this past weekend is we got the second weekend of No Hard Feelings, the Jennifer Lawrence
Yeah,
comedy.
50% drop, not
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, which is the thing is 50% is the norm for a second weekend, but this movie needed to have, it was never going to have There Was Something About Mary Run, but it did need to have a strong series of holds and
Mhm.
leg out in a big way. And I think dropping 50% in the second weekend shows that is probably not happening with this movie. It's probably not going to be even a mini sensation. The beach scene, as much as it should, I don't think is driving great legs for this movie.
Yeah, because you have Joyride coming in July, so that's
Mhm.
creeping up. We don't know how well that's gonna do. Hopefully, that does well. But, yeah, we're gonna have to see smaller drops here for No Hard Feelings if it's gonna do anything really, but the idea that this could get to 60 or 70 looks like a fantasy at this point.
Yeah, a 4 times multiplier, which is what it would have to do to have gotten to 60 domestic, seems, I mean, almost impossible. It's a 29,000,000 after 2 weekends. A 50% drop is tough. This needed to have a really strong hold and do like a 30 something or even a 40% drop to have any chance of having a great run.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's unfortunate. I think next weekend there's not a giant movie, but there is a horror movie. There's a Sinister sequel, and I think that's a film that is actually going to overlap a lot with the No Hard Feelings audience because
Oh,
it's horror.
young women love horror.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Everybody
so
loves horror, but especially young women will go see horror in droves, and that's kind of and it's their date movies because they people love to be scared with someone that they love or maybe like-ish or hopeful that they might have intercourse with. So that's the sort of audience that No Hard Feelings was courting. So yeah, we're gonna see a major dip.
yeah, yeah, and actually, Joyride comes out this Friday, July 7th
Oh
in the
wow.
US.
Okay, yeah.
So no hard and I
It's gonna be
I do
direct
think,
competition.
I mean, looking at it now, it's crazy to say this, but I think Joyride could actually end up being a bigger movie than No Hard Feelings.
I
I'm
agree.
feeling buzz on it. And No Hard Feelings could be walking into a buzzsaw this weekend between a new horror movie and a new, sex comedy for youngsters. No Hard Feelings could really drop next weekend. And we'll talk
And
about that on the weekend preview, but
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
needed to make its bones this weekend. It was going up against Old Man Indy,
Mhm.
and that is where J-Law needed to dine out. Was that movie needed like a 30% drop,
Yeah.
and it didn't happen.
Now, let's talk Barbie tracking because
Okay. You wanna get into it.
you wanted to get into it, and I think we have a little bit of time. Not a lot of time, obviously, because this is not opening for another few weeks.
Yeah, 3 more weeks, yeah.
But this movie dropped on tracking,
Mhm.
and I think, if this holds up box office wise, there's a bit of a sigh of relief here with this
Well,
tracking dropping.
I mean, you say sigh of relief. I feel like it is just the momentum continues for this movie. The hope was always really high on this. The buzz was there, and the tracking is coming in. The studio was saying 60 million, so they're given their conservative studio estimate. That's
Mhm.
what Warner Brothers is saying. But Deadline's saying, based on the tracking, based on the pre-sales, which
Mhm.
apparently are higher than, the comp Little Mermaid. Um, based on the pre-sales, it's starting to feel like $80 million, and 100 million opening is on the table. Now, I think the thing we all have to do here is not let this become the barometer for whether what we think of this movie. Because I would say a month ago, me and you had a talk at BOHQ, and
Uh-huh.
my thought was always, if this hits $60 million opening, that's a win. Obviously, 70 or 80 starts to feel like, wow, that's huge. And anything higher than that is nuts.
Yeah.
Like 90 is nuts. But
Yeah.
I do think the Warner Brothers projection of 60 still feels like if it hits 60, that's a win for this movie. And
Yes.
obviously, anything, 40 or lower, that's a big, big
Disaster.
problem. And 50 is like, okay, that's what we thought. So I think going into this, we can't set the bar at like, when this doesn't do 90 or 100, we're supposed to be sitting here
Yes.
talking about what a disaster this is. Obviously there's a lot of enthusiasm for it now, but we should still remain level headed going into the next few weeks.
I think the thing
I'm urging calm. I'm making a call for calm on the streets.
I think that's very important for you to do that in these times.
Mhm.
So, the thing with Barbie that I think is benefiting it is that so many of these tentpole movies have been terrible.
Yeah,
And I think everybody's looking to Barbie as, you know what? It's not gonna be the same sort of movie that's been released this summer.
right,
It's a
right.
IP that everybody knows, but it's never been fully released. They've never been had a movie that has been released like this.
Yeah. This
This
isn't
IP is
Barbie 5. This isn't old
yes.
Barbie.
This isn't a
This isn't Helen
reboot.
Mirren as Barbie.
Exactly. This isn't a reboot of the Barbie that you knew and loved in the 90s. This
Yes.
isn't right. This isn't a continuation of anything. This is a new take on a property everybody knows. And it's akin to, Mario, how Mario had, the TV cartoon and had like the live action movie that was not actually Mario. So you can't even
Right.
really count that. And that was so long ago. But this is something that to people is looking actually fresh and new compared to an 80-year-old indie, a Flash movie that's coming out way past its sell by date
Right.
with a actor that couldn't even do promotion. uh, you know, so many movies that had underperformed. A long in the tooth Transformers film, which is not a
Right.
success, not a success, not a
Not a
success. We gotta drill
success.
that into people, not a success.
Even though it's gonna
So
be bigger than The Flash and Indiana Jones, which is
which were
wild.
both
That still doesn't make
disasters,
it a
which
hit.
were
Yeah.
both disasters. So the thing that's benefiting Barbie is also actually damaging the box office, which is there's so many bad movies coming into it. Without the Spider-Man cartoon, we would be at loose ends right now when
Yes.
it comes to the
Yes.
box office. So
Yes.
we have to look to Tom Cruise as our savior and Barbie as our savior. And sneakily, Oppenheimer also hit tracking, and it's looking like it's not going to be big for a Nolan movie, but it could do solid business that same weekend as Barbie. The headlines are Barbenheimer or whatever they're saying. I mean,
Yep.
this is creating buzz for the box office, which is positive. So,
Yes.
I think that Barbie hitting this tracking where it's hitting is making us all sort of feel a little bit better about this summer.
Yes. So I'll ask you because I mean we're going to be talking so much Barbie and Oppenheimer in the next month, but
Mhm.
you've been Barbie skeptical. We'll
Yes.
put it that way. And the tracking coming in, do you feel any different about it in terms of whether it's your enthusiasm for seeing it or your enthusiasm for the prospects of it? The numbers
Yeah.
are starting to come in. Is your mindset changing?
The pre-sales are making me feel better about it. I don't count birds until they're in my hand.
Okay.
So I the fact that this is conservatively tracking at 60 is making me feel confident about this movie being a success, because if Warner Brothers is going that low, and I know obviously, I mean, they had The Flash and they went low on The Flash, but this feels different than The Flash.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
just there's good feelings around this film,
yes.
and I think that that is something that's been missing this whole
Yes.
summer other than the Spider-Man cartoon, which actually came more out of nowhere. I feel like there's been a interest online that is transferring to ticket buying,
Mhm.
or there's a lot of buzz online, and separate from that, there's interest in actual ticket buying, because I still do think that more people tweet about this movie than actually will see this movie, but
Well,
there's enough people that are either not tweeting or tweeting and also gonna see this movie.
I mentioned this when we had the great Scott Mendelson on. I do think a difference is a lot of the online chatter is specifically about excitement to see it, which is different
Yes.
than Snakes on the Plane and other movies of that ilk where
Morbius.
The chatter was about how ridiculous this looked, how crazy, how this and that. But the chatter wasn't, I am excited to sit in a seat in a movie theater having bought it. And that is the chatter you're seeing with Barbie. So I do
Mhm.
think the online chatter here is realer than online chatter for other, mistaken hits. And yeah, like you said, I think just the thing here is we've gone through a couple of months now where every time somewhat long range tracking or weeks out tracking comes in, it has consistently come in as a disappointment. That's what
Mhm.
happened for basically every June opener other than Spider-Verse. The tracking was always disappointing 2-3 weeks out. And this is the first time we're getting 3-4 week out tracking that is in a positive direction. So it's
Mhm.
exciting. It's exciting. And we will be covering Barbie Oppenheimer in a big time way on the BO Boys. We've got a lot planned for that
Oh,
release.
yeah. I mean, box office is going to be the story of that
Yes.
weekend, and we're here for box office. That's all we talk
Yeah.
about.
I
We're
mean,
here every week, twice a week, talking about box office.
put it out there right now. There's going to be outlets that usually don't cover box office that are going to be scrambling to figure out how to cover this Barbie Oppenheimer weekend. And the BO Boys are here to give quotes. We're here to give quotes. So if you're an
Available for
outlet,
interviews.
yes, yes. Our time is limited, so make good use of our time when you have us. But we are available to give some quotes for your article because you don't know what you're writing about.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's people who cover this, Anthony D. D'Alessandro, he'll know what to write, but all these outlets, when Sports Illustrated feels like they need to do we need an article on the opening weekend of Barbie Oppenheimer and Maxim and all these outlets, USA Today and so on and so forth, Screw Magazine, reach out to the BO Boys, and we could give you the context you need for your Barbie Oppenheimer box office article.
I think Screw is only online now, right? It's an online only magazine.
I mean, most media is,
Yeah.
Glamour, Screw, they're all just online now. So when Glamour or Screw have to do their box office article for Barbie Oppenheimer, just give us a call. We'll tell you what to write.
And probably reach out to me first only because, Pat is summering, so he may be on vacation, on an endless vacation. I'm a working man, so I don't take a
Right.
vacation, so I'll be here, I'll be in the time zones, I'll be able to talk.
Yes. Yes.
Pat will probably be gallivanting around Europe doing God knows what.
Yeah.
So
I'll text Clayton my quote, and then Clayton could
mhm.
tell you that on the phone.
Yeah, I'll be on my way to work, but that's okay.
Yeah. I
Like a
think
real
that's how it should
American.
be. Yep.
Yep,
All right. Well, I mean, I think we've done it, Clayton.
we
I think
definitely
we
did
really
it.
covered this weekend. So of course, email us. We love getting your emails at theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Boots on the ground reporting, especially if you're in the States, because right now I am overseas. So we need that extra boots on the ground reporting at theaters in the United States. So send us that
Mhm.
at theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on social media at the BO Boys Pod. And guys, we officially are on TikTok. Wanna BO intern Christopher has started up the TikTok account. We got vertical videos going. We've moved to vertical. So we've made the pivot to vertical on
Vertical
TikTok.
integration.
Yep. On our TikTok, on our Twitter. So subscribe at the BO Boys Pod across TikTok and Twitter. See those vertical videos in action. We, of course, are YouTubers. We're on YouTube. So smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. And what else there, Clayton, should they do on
Ring the
YouTube?
bell.
Ring that
Ring that
bell.
bell.
Ring that bell, and the BO Boys will come calling for dinner. So ring that bell on YouTube. Follow us there and give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. And tell your friends to listen to the BO Boys and tell your local media outlets. If your cousin is an editor of Screw Magazine and they got that Barbie Oppenheimer article coming, tell them to reach out to the BO Boys for a quote.
Mhm.
And that's it.
All
I
right.
think we've done it.
I think we have done it, Pat. I don't think there's anything left to say
No.
except for until next time.
Will
We'll smell
smell you
you
at
at the
the box
box
office.
office. Nailed it.
Nailed it. And